The days after walking away were quieter than she expected. No one was rushing to fill her life with tasks. No one demanded her attention. No one assumed she would just be there. At first, the silence felt heavy, like an unfamiliar room with too many empty corners. But gradually, she noticed a soft, subtle relief that she had almost forgotten existed. She spent time doing things she had long neglected: reading without guilt, walking in the park without a purpose, listening to music without distractions. Even small acts, like making her morning coffee just the way she liked it, felt like little victories. She began reflecting on the patterns of her life. How many times had she said yes when she wanted to say no? How many nights had she carried exhaustion like armor? How many moments had she sacrificed her happiness for the comfort of others? The answer shocked her, but also empowered her. Freedom, she realized, didn't require recognition from anyone else. It wasn't applause or approval or gratitude. It was simply choosing herself, moment by moment. And with that realization came confidence, quiet, steady, unshakable. Not everyone welcomed her change. Friends were confused, colleagues were frustrated, family members felt abandoned. Some whispered that she had changed too much, some questioned her motives, others tried to guilt her into old patterns. At first it hurt. She expected resistance. She didn't expect it to sting so deeply. But then she noticed something important. The more she tried to explain herself, the heavier she felt. The solution? She stopped explaining. She didn't argue. She didn't justify. She simply lived her choice. And slowly, people began adjusting. Some with anger, some with distance, and some, quietly, with respect. She realized that when you claim yourself, the world will resist at first. That resistance is proof that you are doing something important. Without the constant weight of obligations and expectations, she found small joys she had forgotten. Morning sunlight spilling across the floor. Conversations with people who truly listened. The satisfaction of saying no without guilt. She began pursuing passions long buried: writing, painting, even volunteering for causes she cared about rather than ones expected of her. Each act reminded her that life could be lived on her terms, and for the first time in years she felt full, not drained. Old patterns tried to creep back. A friend called, expecting help with a task she had always done. A family member subtly criticized her for prioritizing herself. Her first instinct was fear. Fear of conflict, fear of disappointment, fear of being too selfish. But this time she paused. She listened. She empathized. And she responded with clarity. I cannot help right now. I need to take care of myself. It was uncomfortable. It was unfamiliar. But she felt no shame. The more she practiced this, the stronger she became. Boundaries were no longer walls. They were shields protecting her peace. Her choices began affecting others in unexpected ways. People who had taken her for granted started noticing her presence differently, not because she begged to be seen, but because her absence had created a space where her value became visible. Some relationships strengthened, some faded, and she realized that letting go of the wrong energy made room for the right kind of connection: genuine, reciprocal, respectful. She no longer feared being alone because she had learned to enjoy her own company. Part 11. Inner Transformation. With each choice, each small act of self-respect, she transformed. She no longer defined herself by how others treated her. She learned that love and care could be selective, not unconditional at her expense. She understood that peace is not earned, it is claimed. Her confidence became quiet but powerful. Her voice, once soft and unnoticed, now carried weight, not in arrogance but in presence. She understood life differently now. Being kind is not the same as being a doormat. Self-respect is not selfish. Freedom begins the moment you stop explaining yourself. Happiness grows when you prioritize your own soul, not other people's expectations. These lessons were hard-earned. They came from silence, observation, courage, and the willingness to feel uncomfortable. and she carried them everywhere she went. Years later, she could look back and smile. She had walked away without drama. She had built boundaries without anger. She had chosen herself without apology. And she realized the truth every human must learn at some point. You cannot live for others and expect to live fully. You cannot be invisible and expect to be valued. You cannot sacrifice your peace for the comfort of everyone else. She was finally free, not because anyone noticed, not because anyone praised her, but because she saw herself clearly, worthy, enough, and whole. Her story was not about punishment or revenge, yet the world around her didn't celebrate her courage. Some were irritated, some were confused, some questioned why she had suddenly changed. Even friends and family, accustomed to her automatic yes, found her response unfamiliar, even inconvenient. She felt pangs of guilt. She felt doubt. She wondered, am I doing the wrong thing? Have I crossed a line I shouldn't? And then, almost immediately, she felt relief. For the first time, she realized that people didn't own her, that saying yes out of habit had been serving them, not her, that boundaries weren't selfish. They were a form of self-respect, quiet and unwavering. That evening, she reflected on how much of her life had been shaped by fear, fear of rejection, fear of disappointment, fear of being invisible. Saying no had felt terrifying because it threatened her identity as the dependable one. But in truth, her identity had never been truly hers. She had built it to meet the expectations of others. Now, for the first time, she was building something authentic. Something steady. Something that would finally let her breathe. It wasn't perfect. She stumbled in other moments. Old habits crept back. Guilt whispered in quiet corners. But the seed of change had been planted, and she could feel it growing. She understood now that freedom didn't arrive in dramatic gestures. It arrived in tiny moments of courage, in quiet refusals, in the slow reclaiming of herself, in the gentle acknowledgement that she deserved care too. And as she closed her eyes that night, she whispered to herself, I am here, I matter, and I am allowed to choose me. It was the moment she had been quietly preparing for, though she hadn't realized it. The conversation started like any other. Polite, routine, filled with the familiar expectations she had spent years meeting. They assumed she would agree. They assumed she would stay silent. They assumed she would continue to sacrifice herself for their comfort. But this time, she didn't. She paused. Just for a second, enough to let the weight of years sink in, enough to remember the countless times she had been overlooked, dismissed, or replaced, enough to feel the quiet courage rising in her chest, and then she said the words that had lived inside her for years. I'm stepping away. No anger, no drama, no pleading, just truth. A moment, the room froze. Shock rippled through the people who had always counted on her. They didn't understand. They questioned her. They tried to guilt her. But she didn't explain. She didn't justify. She didn't apologize. She simply held her ground. It felt strange at first. Unsettling even. The silence that followed was thick, uncomfortable. People glanced at each other, wondering what had changed. But inside her, something extraordinary was happening. She was free. Free from the invisible chains of expectation. Free from the weight of constant giving without gratitude. Free from proving her worth to people who could never see it. The first day after she walked away, the quiet was deafening. Her phone didn't ring as often. Messages didn't arrive immediately. Invitations didn't come. And yet she noticed something incredible. Her heart was lighter. Her mind was calmer. She felt a peace she hadn't known in years. It didn't come all at once. There were moments of doubt. Moments when guilt whispered that she had abandoned people who needed her. But with every deep breath, every pause, every acknowledgement of her own value, the guilt faded. She realized that being kind and being needed didn't require giving away her entire self. And then, the most unexpected thing happened. People began to notice her absence. Really notice. Not just because she wasn't there to do their work or solve their problems, but because her absence made them realize the quiet weight she had carried all those years. They understood finally that her presence had always been a gift, not an obligation. She didn't return to the same life. She didn't reclaim her old role. She created something new, a life where her energy, her time, and her heart were hers to protect, to nurture, to spend as she chose. And in that life, she discovered the truth everyone must learn at some point. Choosing yourself is not selfish, it is survival, it is respect, and it is freedom. For the first time in her life, she wasn't invisible. Not because others finally saw her, but because she finally saw herself. She smiled, and it was hers alone. Because her entire identity was built on being needed. On being the dependable one. On being the person everyone counted on, even when no one truly counted her. But beneath the fear, there was something else, relief. Not the loud kind, the soft kind. The kind that whispers, "You don't have to live like this anymore." She didn't make a decision that night. She didn't promise change. She didn't announce anything. She simply noticed. And once you notice how invisible you've been, you can never unsee it. Awareness didn't free her immediately. It complicated everything. Once she saw the pattern, she started noticing it everywhere. In the way people assumed she would always say yes, in how her silence was mistaken for agreement, in how her effort was expected but never acknowledged. And with that awareness came something heavy. Guilt. It crept in quietly, disguising itself as responsibility. She began to wonder if pulling back would make her selfish, if setting boundaries would disappoint people, if choosing herself meant hurting others. After all, she had spent years being the dependable one, the fixer, the person who never made things difficult. Letting go of that role felt like betrayal. She tried, at first, to ignore what she had realized. She told herself she was overthinking, that everyone felt this way sometimes, that maybe she just needed rest. But the truth refused to stay quiet. Every small interaction reminded her of how much of herself she had been giving away. Someone asked for help at the last minute, as they always did. Her instinct was to agree without thinking. Her mouth almost formed the word yes. But this time, she paused. The pause felt uncomfortable, heavy, wrong. She felt her heart race, not from anger, but from fear. Fear of being seen differently. Fear of being labeled difficult. Fear of losing the little connection she had, even if it was built on obligation. So she said yes, and immediately she felt the familiar weight return. That night, she lay awake longer than usual. Her mind replayed the moment over and over. Not because of what she did, but because of what she didn't do. She realized something painful. Saying yes had become automatic, but it no longer felt honest. She wasn't choosing. She was reacting. The next day, something similar happened. Another request. Another assumption that she would handle it. And again, that pause appeared. Slightly longer this time. Long enough for her to ask herself a new question. Why am I afraid to say no? The answer wasn't simple. It never is. She was afraid of being forgotten, afraid that without usefulness she would have no place. Afraid that her worth existed only in what she provided. But beneath that fear was a quieter truth she was just beginning to accept. Being needed had kept her busy, but it had never made her valued. That realization hurt more than being ignored. She didn't change overnight. She didn't suddenly become confident or assertive. But something subtle shifted inside her. She began noticing when she felt drained. When resentment quietly followed generosity. When her silence felt like self-abandonment. And with each moment of awareness, the old version of her, the one who never questioned, never paused, never chose, started to feel less familiar. Change wasn't happening yet. But the resistance to staying the same had begun. It happened quietly. A small moment. Nothing dramatic. Nothing anyone would remember. Except her. Someone at work asked her to take on a last-minute task. The kind of task she had always accepted without hesitation. The kind she had done countless times without thanks. Her first instinct was automatic. Yes. But this time, something inside her hesitated. Her chest tightened. Her fingers itched to type a reply. But her mind whispered, "Not this time." So she said it, No, I can't do this right now. The words felt strange on her tongue. They carried weight. They carried fear. They carried freedom. And then, silence. A heavy pause from the other side, the usual frustration, the disbelief, the expectation that she would relent. She could feel the tension. A part of her wanted to backtrack, to apologize, to make it lighter, easier, smaller. But she didn't. She held the space. Her heart raced, but her spirit felt lighter than it had in years. Later, when she recounted the moment to herself, she realized something. This small no was louder than any speech she had given in years. It wasn't rebellion. It wasn't anger. It was recognition that her time, energy, and presence were hers to decide, not theirs to take. She didn't disappear overnight. She vanished in pieces. Little by little, moment by moment. Until one day, she realized she had been present everywhere, yet remembered nowhere. She was the kind of person people relied on without thinking. The one who listened while others spoke. The one who adjusted her schedule, her needs, her emotions, so everyone else could remain comfortable. She arrived early, stayed late, and filled the silence with understanding. But when her voice softened, no one leaned in closer. When she grew tired, no one asked why. Being overlooked didn't shock her anymore. It had become routine. She learned to keep her feelings neat and folded, like clothes put away for a season that never came. She smiled easily, even when something inside her felt heavy. She told herself she didn't need much, that strength meant asking for less. Over time, she stopped expecting to be noticed at all. At family gatherings, she was the quiet organizer, refilling glasses, resolving tension, making sure everyone else felt included. At work, she accepted extra responsibilities without complaint, watched others receive credit, and convinced herself that patience would be rewarded. Among friends, she was the one who remembered details, reached out first, forgave quickly, and stayed even when she felt invisible. She kept giving, believing that consistency would eventually turn into appreciation. But days became months, months turned into years, and still, nothing changed. If you've ever felt like this, present but unseen, needed but unvalued, then pause for a moment. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who might recognize themselves in these words. Asterisk, asterisk. Sometimes hearing your own story reminds you that you're not alone. She told herself she was fine, that this was just how life worked. That being low maintenance made her easier to love. But there were moments that quietly cut deeper than she admitted. Moments when her ideas were ignored, only to be praised when repeated by someone else. When plans were made without her, even though she had helped build them. When she celebrated others' milestones while her own were treated as small or inconvenient. Still, she stayed silent. Still, she tried harder. Because she believed love meant endurance. She believed that loyalty required sacrifice. She believed that if she just gave a little more time, energy, understanding, she would finally matter. What she didn't yet understand was this truth. People rarely notice what never stops giving. And without realizing it, she had trained the world to overlook her. This was her life. Quiet, dependable, invisible. And she accepted it. Until one ordinary moment made her question everything she had been taught to tolerate. It wasn't a breakdown. It wasn't tears. It was something quieter and far more dangerous. It was the moment she realized that even if she disappeared, nothing would stop. That day began like every other. She showed up. She listened. She handled what others avoided. She fixed small problems before they became big ones. She did everything she always did. And for a while, she felt nothing at all. Then it happened. A simple moment. A small one. So small that no one else noticed, but it landed heavier than anything before it. She was speaking, calmly, carefully, offering a thought that came from experience, from effort, from care. But before she could finish, someone spoke over her. Louder. Confident. The conversation moved on, leaving her words unfinished in the air. Minutes later, the same idea was repeated by someone else. This time people nodded, smiled, praised it. She sat there quietly, hands folded, heart sinking. not in anger, but in clarity. Because this time, it didn't hurt the way it used to. It made sense. She finally understood what she had been pretending not to see. She wasn't overlooked because she lacked value. She was overlooked because she had made it easy. For years, she had been available without boundaries, reliable without recognition, kind without conditions. She had trained people to expect her presence without effort, her support without gratitude, her silence without consequence. And the hardest truth settled in gently. No one was going to save her from this but herself. That realization didn't make her bitter. It made her tired. Tired of shrinking to fit rooms that never expanded for her. Tired of explaining herself to people who weren't listening. Tired of earning love through exhaustion. She went home that day and sat alone longer than usual. No phone, no distractions. Just the quiet she had avoided for years. And for the first time, she asked herself a question she had always pushed away. What would happen if I stopped trying so hard? The thought scared her.